Hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to take a couple of minutes to wait as people enter the room. But welcome, everyone. It's great to see the names, familiar names from around the world joining. If you want to take a minute and just enter in the chat where in the world you're joining us from, it's always great to see everyone. Oh, look at the names come in. So many familiar friends. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll give just another minute or two. Team members, colleagues, partners, lots of familiar friends. Qatar, welcome. Colorado, Crestone, welcome. Belle, nice to have you with us. Bogota, hi Mafe, welcome. Kenya, Mombasa. People, nice to see you here. Welcome. All right. Well, while people continue to come into the room, please, let us know where you're joining us from. We're gonna get started before I introduce us all with a little video that we've prepared to celebrate ITDP's 40th anniversary. So with that, let's roll the video, please.
In 2025, we've reached a crucial inflection point for people and our planet, one that demands immediate attention. 2025 is not only a defining moment for the world, it's the year that ITDP turns 40. Now, more than ever, this is the time to put our experience into action. And we can do it, together. Over the past 40 years, the world has changed dramatically. Over 55% of the world's population now live in cities, nearly 4.4 billion people worldwide. Bus rapid transit systems have been adopted in nearly 200 cities, spanning more than 5,800 kilometers. More than 700,000 battery electric buses are on the road. Over 3,000 bike share systems are operating worldwide. Urban cycling has grown nearly fourfold in major cities. Leaders acknowledge the importance of clean, safe public transportation, and cities are responding. ITDP is proud to be a part of the solution and this transformation. We had to make the case for these ideas in the early days. We had to prove that BRT, bike share, and e-buses were viable solutions. We've gone from developing technical work to scale, through policy, finance, and institutional change. We've helped shift the conversation from transportation to cleaner air, better access to jobs, safer streets, and gender equality. We are creating livable cities that prioritize prosperity for all people. We're no longer alone in this space. Governments, development banks, NGOs, and the private sector have joined us, recognizing that sustainable mobility is essential for thriving cities. This growing ecosystem proves the power of long-term vision, persistence, and collaboration. Now is the moment to go even further. We know what needs to be done, and we're making progress, but there's much more ahead. It's time to scale up what works and to imagine what's next. ITDP, 40 years, from creativity to transformation to scale. We're in it together. Learn more at itdp.org.
Amazing, amazing. And isn't it just so incredible to see it all come together after 40 years? Well, welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you here from around the world. If you haven't yet, please let us know where in the world you're joining us from. It's great to see so many familiar names of partners and colleagues around the world. So we are here today to kick off the celebration of ITDP's 40th year anniversary, and there is so much to celebrate. Over 40 years, ITDP has become a real influence in the transportation space, having so many projects and policies around the world to point to as accomplishments of our work benefiting so many people and, of course, the planet. And this has been the result of so many people that have been part of the ITDP team along the way, and so many partners that we've worked with over the years. One of my favorite things is when I'm around the world and I meet a new partner or some senior position, some senior leader in government or in another organization, and they tell me that once upon a time they were an intern at ITDP, or once upon a time they had a very junior position at ITDP, and it's so great to see that's one of the many ways that we continue to have some great influence in the world. Um, and here today, we are with two leaders of the ITDP team. Michael Replogle, who was our founder 40 years ago and has worked as a team member, our board chair, and been an emeritus board member for many years now. And Paul Steely White, who was one of ITDP's first team members years ago. I don't know if you were quite an intern, but I think pretty close to that. And then eventually served on our board and became a board president for a number of years. So welcome, Michael. Welcome, Paul. It's really great to have you with us to kick off the celebration of ITDP's 40th year anniversary. So yeah, just love to get in a bit of a conversation and hear some reflections from the two of you since you've been involved in ITDP's history for such a long time. And Michael, let me turn to you first. I know a lot of people know ITDP well and love ITDP, but not everyone knows our origin story. Could you tell us a little bit more about our origin story 40 years ago?
Yeah, well, we really came out of a spirit of activism in a time um, not completely unlike today when we were challenged politically and spiritually as a country about what America stood for. And Ronald Reagan was mounting an illegal war against Nicaragua, which had a left-wing government that was promoting health and education reforms. The CIA blew up all the oil storage facilities that Nicaragua had in May of '84 and led to a transportation crisis. And I was a bike activist, environmental peace activist, and looking for a concrete way to help articulate alternative vision of what America stood for. And so I cold called a bicycle mechanic up in Boston who I'd been introduced to by a mutual contact in Philadelphia, John Dowland, a great cycle activist in that city who recently passed away. And when I called Carl, I said, hey, why don't we try and recycle some secondhand bikes to Nicaragua, help support health and education there, call it Bikes Not Bombs. And he agreed to organize a chapter in Boston. And through some of his networks, I organized some chapters in DC and beyond. And we agreed to initially send 100 bikes to Nicaragua, which we succeeded in doing by the end of the year. And Carl went down to Nicaragua, helped set up the bike assembly workshops. I organized the national campaign, started a newspaper, the campaign update that we circulated nationally. And once we'd sent 100 bikes, we said, well, why not send 1,000? And by the end of 1985, we'd sent 1,000 bikes to Nicaragua. And I met with Mohammed Yunus, who is now the president of Bangladesh, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics back in 2006, or the Nobel Peace Prize. And Yunus was an expert on microfinance at the time, not very well known, but out of that conversation, we came up with the idea, well, let's sell the bikes on installment to teachers and health workers and use the capital to help fund bringing in completely new, completely knocked down bicycles from Asia. And so out of all of that, we transformed from just a recycling of bikes into developing a bicycle assembly industry in Nicaragua, which then grew and grew. And eventually we turned that over to the private sector in Nicaragua, and it goes to this day. So we really used this initiative built on activism to become part of a transformative change in Nicaragua. In May of '85, we incorporated the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy to be an umbrella nonprofit organization for Bikes Not Bombs and a couple of other campaigns that were starting at that same time, focused on getting bikes to, uh, again, health and development workers and agricultural workers in Haiti and Nicaragua, and collaborating with other stakeholders there. So Mobility Haiti and Bikes for Africa were also campaigns of ITDP in those early days. And so we continued to build that. We organized the Campaign for New Transportation Priorities to start to take on reforming U.S. transportation policy. And that eventually folded into the Surface Transportation Policy Project, which then grew into Transportation for America. So another major transformative organization that had some of its roots in ITDP's origin story. We also, in 1986, I started writing papers, academic papers and papers that I presented at various conferences on, what does sustainable transportation look like? The Brundtland Commission had just published its report on sustainable development, but there hadn't been an articulation of what sustainable transport was in particular. And I'd traveled around the world in the early '80s, visited China and Japan and Europe, and looked at models for the US to learn from those regions, and I'd seen the seas of bicycles in Chinese cities where 90% of all trips were by bike. And then I came home and I saw in 1984, the World Bank wrote a report on the transport sector and said bicycles, basically don't count. That they wrote a transport sector policy study for China that mentioned bicycles in 3 places, basically as a mode of transport that was backwards and that should be consigned to villages as transport modernized. And so I forcefully rejected that idea and started writing papers saying, no, bicycles should be central to sustainable transport policy, and that we need to look at transport that meets the needs of the poor. And most of the poor will never be able to afford a car, and many of them struggle to afford public transport. So bicycles and walking are key things that we need to create space for and not let them be squeezed out by motorization. And so that initial effort at sort of throwing some rocks at the bank from the outside and saying, you guys aren't doing your job, um, led to an international letter writing campaign in 1989 that I organized at an International Bicycle Congress in Denmark. And we got 23 nations, citizens, to write to their representatives on the World Bank Board of Directors, demanding that the bank change their policy focus and incorporate bicycling into their policies. And so by the early '90s, the World Bank was bringing me in as a consultant to try and train some of their staff about what are the opportunities in this space. I got brought on to write a paper on the Asia urban transport sector study on the role of non-motorized vehicles in Asian cities. And we started to build foundations and go from throwing rocks from the outside at the multilateral banks to working with them as partners to try and change the system. And then, that led ultimately to some of the bigger changes that we've seen in the early '90s. ITDP went through a strategic planning process and decided at the board level under my leadership to shift away from logistics intensive material aid projects that we've been doing in Nicaragua, Haiti, and Mozambique, and to focus instead more effort on institutional and governance transformation and helping local stakeholders and local governments ask for the right kinds of development assistance and financing and projects. And so that would led us to spin off Bikes Not Bombs in a friendly split they became their own separate nonprofit group, which I continue to support. They're doing great work. They've sent over 85,000 bikes to developing countries, and they're now helping break down the school to prison pipeline in Boston and Massachusetts by training local youth at risk in Boston uh, in bike mechanics and bike shop management and things like that. And so, this ecosystem has continued to grow and differentiate and build out into a quite sophisticated space where I think we're all, as this movie that we just saw embeds, we're making transformational scale at change. So I'm delighted to have been part of that Genesis story and to see how at age 40 ITDP has become a major force for helping to make our world more equitable and sustainable.
Well, gosh, Michael, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the leap 40 years ago, for having such a vision, for sticking with it for so many years, and also to hear about so many organizations that have been, part of that, the genesis of so many organizations along the way. I know it was until just a few years ago that we were still part of getting bikes to Africa. I think we finally have stopped that part of our programming, but it was one of those things that was just such a part of our DNA that we kept it going for such a long time. And I know you and I were recently together at the World Bank, and we were commenting on the fact that it really is incredible to hear them leading on so many of the ideas that they were not leading on years ago, and including a joint report that we did with them recently about the importance of investing in cycling infrastructure. And we now see China, we've gone kind of full circle. There were so many bikes and then there weren't. And now, we see again hundreds of millions of e-bikes on the streets in China. And that's a phenomenon we see all around the world. So certainly ups and downs, but I think we're making really tremendous progress now. And it's, again, thank you so much for your vision along the way. Well, Paul, let me turn to you. I know the world also looked very different when you started with ITDP so many years ago. What was the world like then, and what was your first position with us?
Oh gosh. Well, before I answer that question, I just want to acknowledge, Heather, the way that I think you've taken Michael's founding ethos, right? And that original kind of focus on not just environmental causes and effects, but the social agenda, right? I mean, Michael, you used the word spiritual. And from the get-go, when I first became acquainted with ITDP, it was so abundantly clear that this was a special organization with a very, certainly important mission, but a really special way of implementing that mission with compassion, with a recognition that you can't just tell people what to do, you have to show them what to do. And even though, as you said, Michael, the organization has evolved, I still see that really unique and effective mix of policy and praxis at work. And I feel like that makes the policy pronouncements, so much more effective, and they land so much better when they know that this is an organization that rolls up its sleeves and does those demonstration projects, whether it's bike mechanics or finance mechanisms for BRT, right? And so that founding spirit is very much alive, and Michael, we just all owe you a huge debt of gratitude for having the moral compass, right? Because as you pointed out, it was a really uncertain time where you wanted to let the world know that this is not what the United States as a whole, necessarily as a monolith stands for. There are people in the U.S. who have a very different vision of how the world should develop, and it's actually a little bit sad now thinking about the days when the U.S. was a force for good in the world, as a nation, and how important it is that we bring those days back. But Heather, your question, and I'm sorry, I just had
Yeah, no, please.
because
Yeah,
Michael
no,
was
that's
talking
great.
about, the founding days there. It's easy to sort of get weepy. But I think I was a receptionist. I know I was a receptionist at the Adventure Cycling Association in Missoula, Montana. I was a grad student there. This is an organization that's always made room for diverse people. I guess as a middle class, slightly above average white kid in the Midwest, it was really a revelation to know that I could reach out to this organization. I saw a copy of Sustainable Transport magazine, and it just blew me away. It was just like the stories were so well written, and the work just seemed so, again, just so topical and important. So I started a letter writing correspondence with Karen Overkin. This is like back before email was as you even a thing. And she wrote me back, a handwritten letter, and so can I help you raise money for this Bikes for Mozambique project? And by the way, I'm looking for a master's thesis topic. Can I like study it? And she said, sure, come to New York and we'll give you an orientation. So I show up in New York, and they immediately put me to work driving a U-Haul truck collecting used bicycles from Westchester. So I was like, wait, I thought this was going to be alternative transportation. I'm just driving around collecting bikes. Um, but really, at the time, I think it was a staff of two or three, Walter Hook, who was my, sort of first boss of the organization, and such a great mentor. And he used to tell stories. These are now like mythical stories of the dot matrix printer in Michael's basement that was used to like churn out the first proposals that you had to hold together with a rubber band because it wouldn't work. But maybe I'll stop there because I could probably go on for hours telling campfire stories about the early days. But it's great to see that the spirit is still alive under your leadership, Heather. And thanks so much for celebrating what truly is a momentous occasion.
Well, thank you, Paul. And I think you told about a little bit of the beginning, but I think you went on to do a lot more than just drive a truck around with bikes in the back. We've been so grateful for your involvement along the way. And well, Michael, you shared so many instances of kind of success and accomplishments over the years, but can you share maybe one highlight of something that you're just super proud of with ITDP accomplishing?
Well, that's like asking who your favorite child is, when you've had many. So, I have to add a few, but
Okay.
trying to be brief. A quarter a century ago, when Walter Hook was president of ITDP, or was the CEO, um, we set out a strategy of creating a flagship BRT model in each region where we work, and that led to a 2003 Bogota meeting that brought together leaders from a couple dozen countries as we put a spotlight on BRT and bikeway successes in Bogota. And that led to, over the next several years, to breakthrough dissemination of best practices and further development of leading city models in Guangzhou and Dar es Salaam and Jakarta, Sao Paulo, Rio, Mexico City, Quito, and I could go on and on and on. We have over 200 BRT systems around the world now, and ITDP has its fingerprints on the majority of them, I think. Um, Another one I would highlight is that, about 15 years ago, ITDP played a central role in founding and helping to lead the SlowCat partnership, the partnership on sustainable low carbon transport, which came out of a meeting in 2009 in Bellagio. That enabled us to undertake a long march through the institutions and spurred a $175 billion 10-year commitment from the 8 largest multilateral development banks for more sustainable transport starting in 2012. And that really was a platform for many productive collaborations with multilateral banks to advance decarbonization in the transport sector. I'm really also proud to have seen how ITDP brought about Mexico's 2018 parking policy reforms, which I think will resonate for a long time, and as well as reforming how national transport financing is done in not just Mexico, but also India and China and Brazil and other countries where, we've helped create these national programs that help bundle city level projects into larger tranches that can be financed by national governments and multilateral banks. And that's all been done through patient building of relationships with key elected officials and stakeholders. And I think all of that's, ITDP is today a vital catalyst that fosters development of bike sharing, cycling networks, public transport system improvements, public space transformations, electrification of buses and bikes, and better data analytics in hundreds of cities across the world. And we've done that through development of best practice guides, training, and especially on the ground, locally supported technical assistance to governments and stakeholders. So it's a winning model. And I'm delighted in your leadership, Heather, that's helping to continue to grow and mature that model.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's incredible. I love the things that you've listed. BRT, slow cap, parking. So often we're like, the ones that somehow get a jewel of an idea from somebody around the world and then just work at it little by little, slowly, and eventually make big impacts. I mean, BRT is one that we've been working on for so many years, still very involved in. And we're just seeing a real resurgence in interest in BRT around the world, which is incredible. And it's because it makes sense. We need to move lots of people in our cities and we need to do it quickly and cost effectively. And BRT is the best way to do that. And now with the introduction of electric buses, it just makes it all better and more modern and cool so that people actually want to get on the bus. And that's what we want more than anything, is for people to feel like they're very proud of getting on the bus, and it's a real great way to move people. And then to think about parking, parking seems like such a tedious, boring thing. And now we have cities really coming to us, understanding the importance of parking, not only to manage their streets, which we have so much more demand for space from the street, whether it's for people movement or deliveries and goods movement, but also as a way to raise revenue for cities, which so many cities desperately need. So I think cities are really getting the understanding of something that seems so simple with parking, and Mexico definitely helped put it on the map, which was such a great thing. And of course, the march continues on with SlowCat and trying to bring more attention to the climate space, and they remain a great partner of ours. So many things to be proud of. And I think hopefully all of the audience knows ITDP well enough. We're 3 Americans here on the screen, but most of our team is from everywhere else in the world and not American at all. And our partners are certainly that. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that our teams on the ground are representative of those places where we're working, and we're not sending in foreigners to tell anybody what to do, but we really take inspiration from everyone around the world and try to make it better and apply it to the local context. Well, Paul, let me turn to you. What is one of those kind of turning events, those things that you see as really kind of definitive in ITDP's history?
Oh gosh, so many to consider. I'll never forget being on a dance floor in Senegal, in Dakar with Enrique Peñalosa. I think it was probably 2002, and this is part of this barnstorming tour, right? I felt like I was changing the world just getting Enrique coffee in the morning, because he just lined him up. He would just like go, and I think there's still lots of great BRT projects and transportation projects throughout the continent that were seeded on that trip with Enrique and Oscar Edmundo Diaz, who were just such brilliant political and technical leaders, right? And Chris Koss, I just have to shout out for Chris for, he was an intern when I was and doing, on staff at ITDP, and just to see what he accomplished over the years with so many brilliant partners in Africa. But the cycle rickshaw modernization project will always be close to my heart in India. I think it's true that we pretty much, pivoted the way that those vehicles are made so that they're lighter, easier on the driver. And those improvements really helped, as you said, Michael, turn around policy where modes that were considered old-fashioned or backward were back in vogue. And great to see that. But, I think I have to speak to my work in New York City. After I was at ITDP for 7 years, I was very lucky to go lead transportation alternatives for 14 years. And I took the ITDP playbook with me, right? I mean, from the get-go, we were looking for best practice to bring to New York, to apply that whole spirit of activism of a big tent organization, right? That like to move policy, you can't be a one-note band. You've got to bring in a whole array of voices. You can't just be an environmentalist, right? You have to have a solid social agenda. I mean, all those great lessons that I was still learning at ITDP. I tried to apply at TA, and I think to the extent that we were successful had a lot to do with Jeanette Sadik-Khan coming in as commissioner, of course, who's been a big partner of ITDP's over the years. But really the model that New York set, which I think has really translated to a lot of cities, around the country. Certainly every time I see a green bike lane when I'm traveling, it's like that's probably traces its provenance back to New York City. So, this is a wonderful organization that's had tremendous influence, and it's hard to point to just one project, but there's a few that are still close to my heart.
Amazing, amazing. Well, maybe in one last question, then we should probably wrap it up, but or maybe two questions. I think you both have touched upon it, but what is a distinctive feature that you think really sets ITDP apart? Maybe Michael, I'll start with you.
I mean, I think ITDP from its beginnings has been not just a think tank, but really a think do tank. And really engaged in not just putting out really good communications and identifying best practices, but rolling up our sleeves and figuring out how to work practically to implement those ideas in specific places, and then using those implementations under a spotlight as examples for other cities to adapt and to scale. So I think, it's that real on the ground local engagement and connectedness to political realities, economic realities, and the challenges that everyday people face in trying to move about their communities. Um, we're not an elitist organization. We're not an organization just of experts. We're an organization that has a heart and a soul and is grounded in the practical space of getting things done.
Well, thank you, Michael. That's such a great way of saying it. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to give recommendations if you haven't actually sat in that seat and know how to do the things. So yeah, we certainly have that experience. Paul, what do you think a distinctive feature of
I mean,
ITDP?
you should have asked me first, because what Michael just said is the perfect is the perfect thing to on.
Repeat.
So I know I'll try to put my Michael hat on and talk about just briefly, like, an impact that I think is true, and also maybe more sort of on the policy side. Before ITDP, transportation was just transportation. I mean, it wasn't even transportation, it was tailpipe, right? It was like when you talked about sustainable transportation or transportation reform, people immediately went to like, oh, that's just about what's coming out of the tailpipe. And ITDP has, I think, changed how that word transportation, what it means to people. Because as the great video, by the way, pointed out, it's obviously because of ITDP's work. It's not just about getting from A to B or how that vehicle is powered from getting to A to B. It's about access, not just mobility, right? Land use, how people live, the impact that transportation has on economic security, public health, equality, right? These are all just like things that people didn't think about when they thought about transportation, and now they do, because of ITDP's work. So it's not too brazen or self-reflecting to like claim credit for that amazing transformation that has happened over the last 40 years.
Yeah, it really is incredible. I think the thing that makes me always so happy is that when people think of sustainable transportation, they often think about livability as synonymous with that, which is when you see a city with great transportation, you see a city that is alive, that people want to live in. I mean, it's really goes together where all people can feel that opportunity that everybody deserves, which is really so special. Well, we are in challenging times now for sure. As history goes, we have times where we feel like everyone's aligned politically around the world, or not everyone, but maybe more alignment, and then times where we have less alignment. And hopefully the pendulums will continue to swing back and forth in our favor. But as you both look to the future, what do you see as a real vision for ITDP looking towards the future? And Michael, maybe I'll start with you again.
Well, I hope the next several years will provide an opportunity for ITDP to consolidate and scale its remarkable achievements working with partners in more than 60 cities across the world, as well as with policymakers at the national, state, and international levels. And global geopolitics and right-wing authoritarian populism will be headwinds to many goals in the near term. I think this will demand new approaches to fundraising and focusing resources to strengthen communities and networks of support. We'll need to be strategic in our communications and bolster the resilience of our organizational capacity. We'll need to continue to build cultural support for advancing sustainable and equitable transportation, even if in some contexts we need to be adaptive in our language. For example, talking about protecting the safety of children and mothers, about climate adaptation, and about reducing the costs of mobility. I see opportunities for growth in how we use data to support our work, in advancing public-private partnerships, and in transforming last-mile urban freight for greater sustainability, even as we continue building on our historic core competencies.
Thank you, Michael. I'm glad we are recording this so I can go back and take notes. Thank you. Paul, what do you see as the vision for ITDP in the future?
Well, certainly everything Michael just said, amazing. Uh, you know, I would add, and you touched on it earlier, Heather, when you were talking about the composition of the organization, and you could have gone further, right? You could talk about how it's always been a part of ITDP's DNA to empower our partners, right? And you see it in the regional offices and the autonomy and the agency that they use, and you see it in the sort of decentralized structure of the organization, which, as you pointed out, is very international and very resilient, right? And so I feel like that's a great model to double down on and carry forward. And I feel like that's exactly what the world needs too, getting away from this command and control and more towards this collaborative leadership model. Um, but I'm so grateful to the organization for carrying a torch too for that compassion and humanity that Michael founded the organization with, and that carries through to this day. I see all these very important, vital aid programs just being not just cut, but just like wantonly destructed for no good reason. It really makes me grateful that we have this shining light in this organization and in our partners, and looking forward to really carrying that forward, because in a world that is so fraught right now and uncertain, ITDP is a beacon, and I think that contrast is people are gonna notice that in the next few years.
Thank you both. Yeah, I think one of the things that I have been observing and have been talking about with others is that, as they say, in times of hardship, sometimes you come together more strongly than ever. And I do see that our sector is really coming together. Our partners, our organizations, our leaders are really coming together, and I think being more collaborative than ever, because it's a time that we really need to do that and focus our energies on the things that really matter. It's also so great that ITDP's tentacles go so far, and in some countries, the things that we see happening in the US are really such a distant idea, that there's real leadership and progress still happening in so many ways in so many places, which is always a great way to stay optimistic that there's so many places and so many things happening, and there's always opportunity, and we just have to focus on that and keep charging on. Well, again, I'm looking at all of the attendees, and there are just so many team members, partners, some of the folks that we've mentioned today as being partners over the years are here with us. So thank you so much for being part of ITDP's history. We're so proud to say that this is our 40th year anniversary, and this is just a kickoff of celebration. Please stay tuned. We're going to have other folks coming in to share some of their observations on history throughout the year, and other events to mark our incredible history. That also includes 20 years of history with the Sustainable Transport Award, Bogota being the first recipient of the award, and so many cities around the world really making tremendous progress. So lots to be celebrating this year with ITDP and all of our partners. I know some of you missed the video that we showed at the start, and it's such a great video. I want to make sure you all get a chance to see it. So let's close by showing the video again. Michael, Paul, thank you so much for being here with us today. Michael, thank you for founding us. Paul, thank you for all of your time and leadership over the years. We really appreciate you being part of this, and all of you for being part of ITDP. So
Yeah.
thank you, and happy 40th anniversary.
Thank you.
Heather.
I would like to offer a shout out to all of the board and staff, past and present, that I've noticed on the list of participants here. And I mean, it does take a village to to make all of these things happen. And I had some good ideas at the start, but without immense collaboration from with all of you and many more stakeholders and engaged folks that have been part of our community, none of this would have happened. So I want you to all hold in your hearts, a celebration of our community, which is a strong community, and I'm confident that we will be resilient and grow stronger over time, and we'll pass through the dark moments that we're in now and enter into a brighter day in which sustainable transport will have an ever stronger foundation as we go forward. So thank you again for your engagement in all of this.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, so I see our current board members, I see past board members, I see board members from our local board. So everyone welcome, and staff members and partners. So thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Paul. And with that, let's roll that incredible short video to celebrate.
In 2025, we've reached a crucial inflection point for people and our planet, one that demands immediate attention. 2025 is not only a defining moment for the world, it's the year that ITDP turns 40. Now, more than ever, this is the time to put our experience into action, and we can do it together. Over the past 40 years, the world has changed dramatically. Over 55% of the world's population now live in cities, nearly 4.4 billion people worldwide. Bus rapid transit systems have been adopted in nearly 200 cities, spanning more than 5,800 kilometers. More than 700,000 battery electric buses are on the road. Over 3,000 bike share systems are operating worldwide. Urban cycling has grown nearly fourfold in major cities. Leaders acknowledge the importance of clean, safe public transportation, and cities are responding. ITDP is proud to be a part of the solution and this transformation. We had to make the case for these ideas in the early days. We had to prove that BRT, bike share, and e-buses were viable solutions. We've gone from developing technical work to scale, through policy, finance, and institutional change. We've helped shift the conversation from transportation to cleaner air, better access to jobs, safer streets, and gender equality. We are creating livable cities that prioritize prosperity for all people. We're no longer alone in this space. Governments, development banks, NGOs, and the private sector have joined us, recognizing that sustainable mobility is essential for thriving cities. This growing ecosystem proves the power of long-term vision, persistence, and collaboration. Now is the moment to go even further. We know what needs to be done, and we're making progress, but there's much more ahead. It's time to scale up what works and to imagine what's next. ITDP, 40 years, from creativity to transformation to scale. We're in it together. Learn more at itdp.org.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for being here with us today and over the years. We appreciate your partnership so much. Take care and look out for some other events to join us for our celebration of our 40th anniversary. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.